This episode is sponsored by Squarespace. Whether you need a domain, website, or online store, make your next move with Squarespace. Maybe you've been wondering to yourself, is it okay to copy another photographer's work? And when does that stop becoming appropriate? I know some of you are thinking that because you message me every now and again to say, is it all right to imitate? And what's the line between having someone as your influence and just plagiarizing them? I think imitation is an important part of any artist's journey, but I do think there comes a clear point where copying actually holds us back and doesn't help us anymore. So let's unpack this one a little bit. On a fairly regular basis, people will send me images they've taken saying something like, hey, I took this photograph and I think it looks like something you might have taken, and I hope you're not offended that I'm imitating you. And the short answer to that is no, because those messages always come from beginner photographers. Intermediate or professional photographers don't go around copying other photographers' work, and they certainly don't message those photographers to advertise that they're doing it. I personally think that it's not only okay for beginner photographers to copy more established photographers, I think it's advisable when you're starting out. I mean, it's how we learn as human beings. We watch what someone else does and then we try and imitate it and do it the same way that they're doing it. And personally, I don't know a single professional photographer who takes offense to the fact that there are lots of beginners out there trying to copy what they're doing so that they can learn. It only becomes annoying when more established photographers are trying to rip off your style as a shortcut to get similar sort of attention. But we'll get to that in a minute. The best advice I can give you though, if you're starting out, is don't just follow one photographer's work, follow a few in a similar sort of vein. It's really easy when we're getting going to look at one photographer and just fall in love with what they're doing and try and replicate every little thing that they do alone and ignore everything else out there. But we stand the real danger if we take that route of delaying the development of our own creative voice because we're following behind one photographer too specifically, and we're becoming too much a direct copy of what they're doing, and we can get stuck. The point of imitating another photographer's work is to set yourself targets that you resonate with. You love the work that they do, and you want to see how much you can make your images look like theirs. And you won't reach that target because you don't yet have the experience or the skill set, but that's not the point. The point is to see how close you can get and all the little things that you're going to learn along the way. And if you follow one photographer too specifically, you could come out of that learning phase having a very limited skill set instead of following a group of photographers and using them all as targets, and in the process learning a varied skill set and coming out as a much better rounded photographer. I'll give you some examples of the photographers I used as targets when I was learning for myself. And when it comes to portrait photography, it was photographers like Steve McCurry and Peter Limburg and Irving Penn, because I love the humanity in their images and it was something I wanted to build into my own shots. And I really appreciated the very sensitive and natural way that they used light in their images. In street photography, because of my love of a creative use of light and shadow, it was photographers like Trent Park, Ray Metzger, and Fan Ho. Those were my targets because they embraced contrast. They exposed for the highlights. They let the shadows fall dark. They weren't trying to do that traditional reportage street photography. They were out there creating surrealistic scenes and often hiding their subject's face in shadow. My goal wasn't to try and copy wholesale what any one of these photographers was doing though. They were just a collectively loose direction to walk in and learn in, all the while still trying to uncover who I am and what I uniquely have to say. I wasn't trying to just copy one of their styles and substitute it for my own. They were just that direction to walk in while I was trying to uncover my own unique style. So yes, if you're a beginner photographer, imitate, copy like crazy. It's a great way to learn. Just make sure you aren't copying one photographer too specifically. Copy a few. Create a stable of heroes for yourself who provide you that loose direction to walk in and learn in. And I believe as you do that, your style is going to emerge between the gaps of all their works. The other reason that I'm warning you against following one photographer too specifically is one of the worst things that can happen is coming out of that beginner stage and you're starting to establish yourself as a photographer, you're just known as a weak copy of what someone else is doing. I mean, we already have a Steve McCurry, so if I'd followed behind him too closely and got to this stage of my career and was just known as an anemic version of a great photographer, I would have created a trap of my own making and put a ceiling on how far I could grow, instead of doing the hard work of uncovering my own unique voice and what I have to say, because who knows how far that could go. I know established photographers who are still copying another photographer's work really specifically. Same sort of subjects, same locations, same lighting setups, same angles, same post-processing. But the problem with that is the only place they're ever going to get attention for that work is amongst beginners who are too uninformed to know what they're doing. Their fellow established photographers are going to be looking at them, they would have clocked what they're still up to, and they'll say to themselves, we don't have to take this guy seriously because he's still imitating, and it's only beginners who copy the work of other photographers. They're holding themselves back. At some point, if you're serious about this, you have to do the hard work of finding out who you are and what you uniquely have to say. If you've been copying the work of other photographers for years, you might be keeping yourself an infant in terms of your development, and we want more from you than that. We need unique voices with unique points of view. And I promise you, if you do that work, it will definitely be more compelling than just giving us faint echoes of your hero's work. Just copying the techniques of another photographer beyond those beginner stages also shows that you don't really understand what makes that photographer's work great. If you're going out there and copying their lighting angles and their lens choices and you think you're producing work that's exactly the same quality as theirs with just as much substance, I would suggest you're following the wrong people, because if you can follow any photographer and you can just copy a spec list and produce work of exactly the same quality, then their work doesn't have much substance in the first place and you need better heroes. That's why I tell beginner photographers not to worry too much about copying the greats, because you are in no danger of accidentally producing work that's as good as Sebastião Salgado or Richard Avedon in your early stages, because you don't have nearly the experience or the skill necessary to do it. And what made them great was nothing to do with their gear choice or their techniques. They developed a way of seeing and a worldview for themselves that took them years of personal development, and that was the substance of their work. And when you finish teaching yourself the little techniques on the ground, the details, that substance work is going to be there waiting for you as well, and it will take you as long. But I promise you, if you put your time into that, and it can be work that's only done by you, by the way, that stage can't be copied. But when you take that journey and start to build your worldview and put that substance into your own images, that's the stuff that will set you apart and take your images to a much higher level. You know what I think the biggest sign is that you're ready to move on from imitation in your creative journey? Is that you're asking yourself this question: am I copying so-and-so's work too much? Because I think it betrays that you're already feeling uncomfortable, that you suspect that you might be in danger of lazily replicating someone else's work instead of doing the hard work of discovering your own voice. At the end of the day, it's an integrity issue, and you have to get honest with yourself about your motives. There are lots of photographers out there who lie to themselves and who shamelessly copy the work of other photographers because their actual motivation is to get attention. And a quick and easy way to do that is to copy better photographers and get attention from beginners down there who are coming up who think you're brilliant. But I hope you're the other kind of photographer, the one who's serious about finding out what you have to say uniquely. And that's your journey into the future. And for you, it's important to move from imitation to innovation as quickly as you can. It's probably worth saying at this point that there's nothing wrong with having influences the whole way through your journey. All the greatest artists through history had influences who they proudly owned. But even though their heroes' work reverberated through their own, they diverged in significant ways. They found their own voice and they made sure to take things further and tell their own stories with that work and not someone else's. But here's the key for me. Great artists acknowledge their influences. They know that they've stood on the shoulders of giants to get to where they are. If you talk to somebody and they don't want to acknowledge the similarities between their work and their obvious influences, it might be a sign that they feel guilty, that they've lent too hard on imitation and didn't do the hard work to discover their own voice. Great artists aren't insecure about their influences, they're grateful for them because they know that they're only influences and they left imitation behind a long time ago in favor of their own creative voices. So if you're starting out, replicate, steal, copy, imitate like crazy. It's a great way to learn, and I think it's absolutely okay. Just remember to build yourself that stable of heroes that become your loose direction to follow, and remember that the reason that you're following them is not to create direct copies of what they're doing. It's just to give you that direction to walk in, all the while discovering your own voice. Identify early when it's time to move on from imitation to innovation, and one of those signs will always be if you're asking yourself, am I copying too much? Is this okay what I'm doing? And then push yourself to get to know yourself and find out what you have to say, and take that journey to start to build substance into your work that's your own. Remember that you won't be taken seriously as an artist unless you take that journey to discovering your own voice. I mean, we all think the same. We all know who Rembrandt is, but there are artists out there who can exactly replicate one of Rembrandt's pieces right down to the techniques that he used, so much so that it even baffles the experts and they struggle to tell the difference. So why don't we know their names? It's because we always credit the original mind and the original creative voice. Great art comes out of who we are as individuals, not the tools and techniques that we use, which is why imitation is only really useful for beginners. If you're in this for the long haul, move from imitation to innovation as quickly as you can. You need to put that need for attention aside and take that long road. Don't get caught being a weak copy of somebody else. Fight to be an artist with your own unique voice. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this episode. If you need a new website or a domain, they're a fantastic option. I've used them myself for all my online work now for at least the last 8 or 9 years. One of the great things about Squarespace is the analytics they provide you, which you can either access through the back end of the website or in the app on my phone. I can see things like where people are visiting from, what geographies, how they found me, what search engines they use, what terms they use, where they're spending time on my site, what things they're reading or looking at for longer. And all that helps me design a website that better interests my audience. Start your free trial today at squarespace.com and go to squarespace.com/Sean Tucker to get 10% off your first purchase.